And thank you all for joining here. And we have a really exciting webinar today. This one's really got the blood flowing, the heart's pumping, Office 365 versus GSuite. So we've got a lineup of speakers of legends are made of. We've got Joey Mailer here with UpCurve Cloud. Can you give us a little background about yourself, Joey? Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Joey Mailer, I'm VP of Sales here at UpCurve Cloud. I like to tout myself as a GSuite expert. I've been in the Google ecosystem for 12 years, so this is really my core competence. This is what I do day in and day out. We really help companies transition from where they are now to where they want to be, right? From the legacy platforms to the cloud. And that starts with the basic fundamentals of communication and collaboration. So I have a sales team that report to me, and they are responsible for going out and getting new accounts signed up. And we have a large customer base that we also manage on a day-to-day basis of GSuite customers. And it's been a great ride so far and not slowing down anytime soon. 12 years, that's 2008. Yeah, that's, Google. So G Suite, for those that don't know the history, has gone through probably 5 name changes, but the very first one was Google Apps for Work, and that was back in 07. It was just email. You got email and a couple of other little bells and whistles. It didn't even come with Drive back then. So you can see how far it's come in that period of time. But yeah, it was, back then is when G Suite, well, now it's G Suite, but Google Apps became a business offering from Google. So hopefully you bought some Bitcoin back then too, because you got out of the curve. I was not aware of Bitcoin back then. I wish I would have known. I was a little late to that bus. Okay. Yeah. Well, our other presenter today is Dustin Sitton. And Dustin, can you give me a little background and also the host capabilities back so I can share?
I just saw your note. You should be the host now. Sorry about that.
Okay. No worries.
So hello, everyone. My name is Dustin Sitton, and I'm the principal of Incite Automation. Before starting Incite Automation, I was a software developer for most of my career, writing code that you would expect, sitting at screens and screens of scripts and scripts and scripts. And I wrote software for companies and organizations, large and small. And several years ago, while running a large consulting firm, I found a better way. Using Salesforce, using Microsoft's Dynamics 365 platform, which is like their version of Salesforce, and even using Office 365 as a development platform in and of itself, we replace custom applications, big ERP systems. We remove Excel hell for companies of all shapes and sizes. And these tools have really crested over to a point where all the advantages of buying something off the shelf and all the advantages of having something custom, the flexibility, the malleability, we can offer in one preferred suite between the tools that we use. So we do custom software development differently, using what you already own in Office 365. Yeah, we're having a blast doing it. That was a terrible way to wrap that up. Back to you, Ian.
Now, we really have all of you guys, I've worked with you both here in Virginia and Washington, D.C., but your companies, Dustin, you're based in Baltimore. Joey, your team's based in California, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's where our main office is. We're a remote company, so our employees are spread out throughout the U.S., but we do have a base in Los Angeles where our support team sits.
That's great. All right, so I guess how do we get to talking about these things in the first place? Well, here at Ian Computers, we're really looking at IT from a different perspective. So one of the things we really want to provide is guidance to our customers about the values that they're going to get from their technology And what we see is that oftentimes people buy technology based on the price of the technology. And, you know, that often is you know, not the whole picture. Obviously, the technology can have a big impact, and you might save a nickel on your monthly bill, but then you have your accountant in Excel hell, like you mentioned, Dustin, you know, having to juggle a lot of spreadsheets, doing a lot of manual clerical work. You might have, you know, security risk and exposure. You might have gotten into the wrong platform, but that platform is not really set up to be secure. So we really want to look at the impact this technology has for our clients. And we do this through having a properly staffed IT department. We find that a lot of organizations, they're buying really help desks today, but they don't really have IT leadership. They don't have people looking after risk and exposure. They may not even have staffing around you know, how to properly manage their infrastructure, how to do projects, or even how to administer these cloud-based platforms. You know, when you go from having all of your systems in the closet to, you know, having things in the cloud, it's all about that virtual license and having access to things. So, you know, we've seen a lot of people, especially in the GSuite world, because you can start off for free, you know, lose access to things because it wasn't set up correctly in the beginning. Nobody wants to, you know, have their former business partner walk out with all of their files. So today we want to really get away from preference, you know, right-hand drive versus left-hand drive. You know, obviously, if we started work with one of these platforms, we're going to have a natural preference to it. It's just going to seem comfortable to us. We want to get away from preference and, you know, really think about the overall value. So we're kind of focusing in on, you know, what you get for about $12 a month. Both platforms have a $12.50 respective price point. So I've asked the speakers to kind of focus in there, but we're going to also kind of zoom out and look at some of the big picture. I think both platforms have some add-ons that you can go beyond those price points as well. So we could also maybe call out some of those cabooses that could be sort of put on to these platforms to let you grow. So firstly, let's talk a little bit about the contenders. We've got Google, we've got Microsoft. Look at those founding dates. You know, Eaton Computers, we were founded in 1997. We are older as a company than Google. You know, Google is younger than us. That's hard to believe. I wish we had quite the impact that Google has had on the world, but that's quite a difference in founding. And then Microsoft is substantially older than probably a lot of people realize, 1975. That's a pretty old founding date. What do you guys think about the sort of the spirit of these two companies?
Do you want to start, or do you want me to?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can, you know, I can start a little bit, but it's evident that, you know, Microsoft, both companies were, you know, ahead of their time in respect to where the world was headed, right? Both of these companies created a new category within not only the business world, but the consumer world. So both of them obviously sit on that pedestal of, you know, world-changing type of organizations. Obviously, Google was really one of the first companies to be, you know, fully internet, right? They were, you know, right there on the start of the internet age, and obviously created this behemoth company through their AdWords and their algorithm. But where they also found success was being one of the survivors of the dot-com boom, right? And they were able to see ahead and understand where the work was shifting and get ahead of that curve with internet-based communication and activity. So, you know, that obviously speaks for itself. You can see where they are now. You know, Microsoft obviously with the PC, again, revolutionary. They saw what was coming, right? They knew that at some point the computer was going to be cheap enough to get in the hands of every consumer, no matter what. And you know, they have sustained, and obviously they've gone through some ups and downs in the 2000s, but I can, yeah, I think everybody's in agreement that these are two of the top technology companies now, and they'll continue to be for a long time.
I'll give I won't answer differently. I'll hit it from a different angle, because you know, obviously no one would disagree with any of that. This is largely conjecture, so feel free to call objection as I say this. But I have friends in both companies, and some of them pretty high up in both. My buddy runs Google Maps, believe it or not, and you know, I asked all my friends at Microsoft, all my friends at Google, what are the cultures like? How do you succeed at both of these companies? And my sample sizes are small, 2 or 3 people at each company, but I was surprised that I got similar answers from each of them, from each of the people at those companies. And my friends at Microsoft basically say, the way to get ahead at Microsoft is to really look out for yourself and figure out a way to squeeze money out of whatever it is that you're working on. If you can figure out a way to squeeze more money out of whatever you're on, you will excel at Microsoft. Be it a product that has been around for decades or a new product that you're on a team for, if you can make something successful or more profitable, you will rise to the top, okay? And that can be a bad thing in a lot of ways. I'm actually rooting for Google to go from 1.3 to something closer to Microsoft, because one of Microsoft's favorite tricks is once they have a dominant market share, they jack up the price, and because there's nowhere else to turn. And that's one of the ways that people get ahead there, is figuring out ways to incentivize their customer base to switch. Google has a different way to rise. At Google, from what I'm told, the way to rise is to create something that makes waves, to make something new. And that causes an interesting culture. Whenever I see Google, my phone starts going crazy. Sorry. You know, to rise at Google, you can't do a great new feature really in Google Maps. You have to start something new. And the way that comes out on the other end is there's a website, what is it called? You all can look at either killedbygoogle.com that has the hundreds and hundreds of products that come and go year after year. It's because people are looking to make that wave, make their name within the company. A lot more products come and go just in the collaboration space. Google Allo, Google Chat, Google Wave, Google Hangouts, Google Currents, right? Like there's always a list of new things that come and go, so it can be more turbulent. But that's how they rise, and I look at that as I look at the cultures of them. I don't really know where I'm going with this other than to answer your question, Ian, of like, what are these companies like? And for me, I look a lot at culture, and that's what I've gleaned from people that I know at both. You know,
so when I started out in '97, you know, Microsoft pretty much had that stranglehold over the industry, and it really seemed unbreakable. I mean, they were just at their peak. And, you know, Google really found that way of breaking that stranglehold really in you know, having a free service. But the flip side with that free service is that, you know, the consumer then becomes the product. You know, Google gives away Android. They make nothing on the Android platform because, you know, where Apple makes the majority of their revenue through selling hardware, because they're really monitoring the end user. You know, the end user is the product. So, you know, it's very interesting. You know, Microsoft's stranglehold, you know, having that monopoly, you know, it took a very different business model to break that. So both of these platforms, like you said, Dustin, you know, very, very strong platforms. You know, with Google, Google has something that really Microsoft doesn't have. You know, Microsoft has the desktop. It has sort of that traditional platform. It also has Xbox. Apple, not very many businesses are going to be doing anything off of Xbox. But really, Google has quite an advantage with Android and also the Android kind of netbooks, Chromebooks, out there on the platform side of things these days. I think, Dustin, you might have just said that you're using a Google phone.
Yeah, I am. Although, yeah, weirdly, I made my Google phone look like a Microsoft phone just because I like that interface of the old Metro interface still, but I love my Google. Microsoft's, the vast majority of their revenue, yes, they've got Xbox, that's less than 1% of their revenue. Their revenue comes from business applications and businesses, right?
Yes.
That's their core. If you took that out, there would not be a Microsoft. People forget that. They think of them as a consumer company because they do have that presence. But, Apple has a nothing burger of a footprint in business, compared to Google and Microsoft. They're a consumer company. Microsoft is first and foremost business first. Google is the one making the most strides to challenge that. And I hope that they do, like I said, because it'll keep Microsoft honest. But they are not first and foremost yet a business, reliant on the business world, like an SAP, like an Oracle. Google is trying to break into the conversation, in my opinion, and successfully doing so, but not quite on that level yet of a company known as a business, enterprise thing first,
right?
In my opinion.
No, it's true. And obviously Google, the cash cow of Google is the ad side, right? That feeds everything. So that is where everyone's paying attention. But if you've read or if you've participated or read any of the follow-ups to some of their recent earnings reports, you could see the trend shifting a little bit to what they call other services, right? And that's the cloud service. It is actually their fastest growing business unit outside of ads, right? And other services include anything under Google Cloud, which is GCP, GSuite, Chrome browser, Chrome management. So anything that has that business connectivity to it falls under that category. So there is with some of the moves that they've made recently, there is this renowned sense of urgency to build up that business unit within Google. So, you're starting to see more and more focus and releases coming out and updates across the board for some of their business products.
Mm-hmm. And most of us really depend on, Google products. We start our day with a Google search bar. We start a lot of our trips with the Google Maps. Even though we might not be using Google hardware, really those platforms and then the integration into those platforms is really key for a lot of business functions. I would say Microsoft really dominates probably the hardware integration, with maybe the exception of personal assistant devices like the Hello Google or Alexa platforms. If there's any sort of business hardware, it pretty much has to go through a PC. So that's quite an advantage there for Microsoft.
Yeah, absolutely. Windows is obviously not going anywhere anytime soon. Active Directory is another, key infrastructure component to the success of businesses that are, using Microsoft. So, obviously they each have their pros and cons, which I guess is, what we're going to be talking about here today. So it's good topic.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about client fit. What clients tend to really resonate with these different platforms, and let's talk about some client success stories. So Joey, I'll let you sort of start off with what type of, maybe we should start with the user demographic fit. I mean, you could have, here we have two different tech companies, 1975, 1998, probably a very different user demographic potentially between those two companies. That might be a good place to start.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you frame it that way, because that is something that comes up a lot, right? In terms of not so much what's the business right fit for the business, but businesses are starting to look more at what do my employees want, right? If you go back in time, traditionally, IT decisions were made, with the IT guy and the C-level guy, and whatever decision they made, that's what they were pushing out to the employees. Didn't matter what the employees were using, right? Didn't matter if they were kicking and screaming. This is what we're using, and this is what it's going to be. There was a term that was coming out around about 7 or 8 years ago, the consumerization of IT, right? The notion that the best technology you're using is no longer at the office, but it's right there in your hand, right? It's what you're using on a day-to-day basis as a consumer. And that started shifting towards the business world. And now it's, become apparent that IT decisions are being made at the top level, but they're taking into consideration, what do my users want? What are they asking for? What are they using? What are they most comfortable with? What's the least barrier to entry? What's going to minimize change management? And with GSuite, the demographic that's coming into the workplace now, the millennials, right? Anybody who's coming out of school the last couple of years, most of the time, all they know is GSuite, right? From the time they're in elementary school to high school and to the top universities, most universities nowadays are running on the Google education platform. And that was no coincidence. I think Google had a plan, and it's worked out pretty well, where we're going to give this away to all these schools because we want kids to get comfortable with our platform, so that when they get into the working environment, this is what they know. So you're starting to see companies that have a younger demographic of employees gravitate more towards GSuite, because again, that's what some of these employees are using and they're familiar with. You're also seeing organizations that have a remote workforce gravitate towards GSuite because of the real-time collaboration and some of the benefits that it offers to those kind of companies. So younger demographic, more collaborative first type of environments. And we're also seeing younger and younger C-level executives come into leadership positions. And again, a lot of these people come from the Google world, either at their previous employer or if they're coming out of school, and they realize that they need to become a more cloud-first, collaboration-first type of environment. So those type of companies definitely lend themselves more towards a GSuite type of environment. The ones that we see that have more of a negative approach towards GSuite are the companies that are predominantly dominant on the Microsoft stack. They've been using it for 20 years. They're all Outlook users. They use the on-prem, or they're not using the web applications. They're using the applications built on the desktop. Older demographic, older decision makers that are more keen to making that decision of going to Microsoft because that's what they're comfortable with, that's what they know. And change is hard, right? One of the hardest things to do is, as a business, is change and rip and replace something that you've been so used to for so long. So that's where, from my perspective, I see sort of that line being drawn, right? Is GSuite is being adopted very well with new millennial, younger type organizations that have more of a remote workforce collaboration first friendly type of environment versus more of your traditional old school type of business that employees have been there 20 years, right? Been using Microsoft forever, and change is just not going to happen there.
Yeah, and so I mean, I've seen it, and what we've seen is that it used to be that people would want to adopt GSuite because maybe some of the remote collaboration, but now that Microsoft is on par or maybe even ahead of Google in some of those capabilities, there's really no reason to go through the pain of change, to just sort of maintain the day.
You're right. Google's strategy has been to get into the schools. Why they would adopt a failed Apple strategy from my childhood I don't know. Because it didn't work for Apple when they did it in the 80s and 90s, and it's not working that great for Google now. You know, if I hired an employee that couldn't figure out how to use Outlook from Gmail in about 4 minutes, I'd probably fire them. It's not that big of a email. There's an inbox, there's a sent folder, there's a search at the top. It's not that big of a lift. So, you know, switching from the concepts are the same. A word processor is a word processor. Email's email, in my eyes. There's no huge advantages on those fronts, in my opinion, between the two. I think that they will find that that strategy didn't work out for Apple. It's not going to work out for them. You know, they're giving away their products, and it's not going to get them that far. They're still struggling to nail the basics, and I can illustrate that when I get the screen in a little bit of collaboration. You know, Gartner, Forrester, everyone agrees. The two that are in this conversation are Slack and Microsoft. Google's not even in that conversation. You know, everybody has the ability for multiple people to be working in multiple documents at the same time. Google has an enormous hole to fill with a lack of a Slack or a Teams competitor. And they are trying to get out of the ooze on that with Google Currents, which is laughably behind at this point. So I disagree on the collaboration front. They are seen as a straggler at this point on that compared to the leaders. And the argument, which is not unique to you, you know, that's part of Google's strategy, you're right, is to get into schools, holds no weight with me, because I'm like, really, it takes that long to learn an email application or a word processor? I don't buy it.
Well, I guess both platforms these days, I mean, it's, I guess it's fairly, Google is set up pretty well to save Microsoft things into the Google Drive.
Yep.
And you can pull them back out again.
I disagree. The difference is, and this is huge if you think about it, in Google Drive, you have to take the document and download it. If you're not using the Google Suite, if you wanted to use Word or Excel, which we can absolutely talk about whether or not you need Word or Excel, because if you don't, then stick with the G Suite. But if I wanted to work with a document in SharePoint, I can keep that document in SharePoint, and I'm saving directly to it. There's not even a save button anymore in Word or Excel. It's automatically saving as you type. If I put a document in Google Drive, and there's a lot of things I like about Google Drive, I got to download it, do my stuff, upload it again. And I don't have to do that if I'm using a Google document, right? That is a big barrier to entry to using it, in my opinion. You're forced to convert your documents to, you know, in my opinion, to use it best from Excel to, you know, Google Sheets to really be able to use it correctly. If you need that desktop interface of a Word and Excel, because you work on the go in places where you're disconnected, and I know that Google has offline modes, no question about it. You can work in a browser without it, but it's not the same. You know, if you need those products, you can save seamlessly in Office 365 land. You can't do that with Dropbox. You can't do that with Google Drive. That's a big difference to me. It's also a big difference to me with this $12 versus $12 thing, in that for that $12 in Office 365, I'm getting full-blown desktop versions of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, as well as the web versions. Google doesn't have desktop versions of their suite. So I'm paying $12 for these tools, but in Microsoft land, I'm getting the analog, and in my opinion, more, but also the full-blown Office suite. Like that's a big difference. Microsoft's version of the suite that doesn't include Office is $8 a month, a 50% savings. See, that truck outside likes it. Sorry. So for me, that's a big difference just in that apples to apples of prices. Geez, one includes a full desktop suite in addition to a web-ified web version, and the other doesn't. And if that matters to you, great. And maybe this, Joey, puts me in the old fogey camp of wanting those desktop tools on some occasions, right? I can see that.
Yep.
That's part of it, but I don't think I'm alone. Maybe I am showing my age. I've definitely got the gray hair for
Well,
it.
no, it's a valid discussion because it's true, right? I mean, I obviously see it day in and day out talking to customers that want to move over to G Suite. And a lot of companies don't care about that anymore because they're always working in the browser, right? They're remote, they're traveling, they're going to their different office locations. So again, that's a shift that's happening within the business world. Is a lot of companies are wanting to move to a complete cloud first environment and get rid of anything that's local, I mean, there's a whole checklist of reasons why some companies would want to go that route. But there's, to your point, other companies who have to have that on device or local extension or local access for whatever reason. So it does come down to the fit.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying it comes down to whether or not you need those local applications or not.
Yeah, for me, when I'm doing an RFP, a request for proposal, for those not in the know, and I'm often copying and pasting, not just from Office products, but from things I find on the internet and stuff like that, and dragging things in and stuff like that. And I was frustrated that in Chrome, trying to do that in a browser, I was struggling sometimes because things weren't paced properly, just stuff like that. And it would frustrate me enough that I was like, I'm opening this in Word and then I'll paste it back into my G Suite, copy. Because I've got both in our company because I like to stay apprised of what's going on. And every time I found myself going back because there was always this little last mile that if I was doing anything more than just writing a basic paper, I ran into roadblocks, and it was just natural with some of those tools. And there are times for me personally, because I'm a consultant, I'm on the road, that I don't have internet access. And I want to be able to bring it up. And also, I will tell you, I have won proposals standing in front of an audience because I was prepared to do a sales presentation without Wi-Fi, and the other guy wasn't, They didn't have coverage. They based their whole plan on having 5 bars, and they didn't at that particular office. And I had a backup plan, in PowerPoint and things like that. And they just had to talk, and I still had stuff to show. And so, call me an old fogey, but I like having the choice and the balance of both. And
sure.
Out of 10, I'm going to go with what I've got online, but boy, am I glad to have it even when I don't need it, that ability to work offline and ability to have things still on my desktop in a seamless way.
So Joey, does that offline capability change? I'm not a big Chromebook user myself, but how does it change when you go over to the Android OS and try to do those things in Android where it's more native?
Well, again, it comes down to whether or not you're connected, right? You do all the changes, but they're not going to upload until you're connected. So if you're connected via your LTE or Android, it's as though you're working, in real time through the browser. But if you're not online, again, you make all those changes, and as soon as you get connected, whether it's Wi-Fi or local connectivity, all those changes update automatically. Yeah. So it does cause, there is a little bit of give and take there, but for a lot of companies, it's okay. It's good enough, right? It works. They understand. They would rather have the real-time collaboration than have access online 24/7. So
but you can have both. I mean, there's plenty of collaboration. I think if we harp on the collaboration front, we get into Teams and the Office suite and SharePoint. That front is one as well in Microsoft land. Like, it's not like, no, we don't have offline, but we have better collaboration. I don't think that's true either, You look at, again, I started off talking about how Google, to get ahead, agree or not, you got to make a product. And one of my favorite examples of this is you go into Google Drive and you click on a document. to open in view. And the first thing that comes up is it opens the document using Google Drive. And then there's a button at the top of the screen that says open with Google Sheets. Why would I want an inferior Google Drive version of a viewer when we're all in the web browser? Why didn't it just open it in Google Sheets? Why do I have that double hop? You know what I mean? It's because there's two different teams making these, and I guess they're integrated, but in Microsoft land, when I'm looking at something at SharePoint, on the right-hand side, full-blown Word and Excel, the web versions open in the preview panes, you know? In Google land, these are still segmented products. You look at Teams that now offers this single pane of glass where you can see every product you own, Microsoft or not, in a single application, right? That's collaboration, that I can reference all these different tools regardless of the maker is. I don't see a lot of legs where Google stands these days of being able to trumpet that we're better at collaboration, and Forrester and Gartner agree. So I don't know, to me, they don't win the collaboration front either. That space is owned by Slack and Microsoft these days, you know, because they're all still different teams working on different tools.
Yeah, but again, you know, obviously it comes down to what do you consider collaboration, right? Different companies see it entirely different. Healthcare company, for example, right? They aren't as outside collaborative because of all the PHI and sensitive data. They're more internal collaboration, where GSuite is going to check every single box off, right? Companies that, you know, speak with outside vendors or third party, yes, I could, obviously that's where Google does lack a little bit in terms of bringing all that into one singular pane. They recognize that, and, you know, whether you like to hear it or not, they're building that out, right? It's on their roadmap, but it's not here today. Again, you have to look at, Microsoft's had a 25-year head start, right? What Google's been able to do in, you know, really, I'm not even going to say that it was, you know, that G Suite was ready for the business world in 2007 or 8. It really took a turn in about 2010 when they added Drive to it, and, you know, the new regime came in, and then Diane Green came in, and now TK's in there, and he's really making, you know, a complete overhaul of the business model and the go-to-market strategy. So, you know, there's a lot of room for improvement, but I could tell you, you know, what I'm seeing on the roadmap, they're going to make it happen. There's tons of small businesses, medium-sized businesses, you know, that I hear from every single day that we've moved over to G Suite, and, you know, we hear, oh, I wish I would have done it sooner, right? And if you ask 100 of them, they're going to give you 100 different answers as to why they moved to G Suite, right? Again, it depends on who you ask at the company, what the company's doing, what they're looking for, where are they looking to save costs, are they looking to be more collaborative, right? It's so many different variables there.
And to me, it's the same price point, but they're still playing catch up on a lot of features. And, or even in my opinion, it's actually 50% more expensive because it doesn't include desktop versions. And so it's hard for me because for me, as I look across the suite, I think Google Forms is a better product than Microsoft Forms. At least they named them both the same thing. Yeah. I think, and again, this is all opinion, and I think Google Drive is a great product. It's got some good features. And I think Google Sites is a much easier, intuitive product in the right circumstances than SharePoint for certain scenarios. Right. But otherwise, they haven't necessarily, in my opinion, nailed the basics yet, but they're charging to go toe-to-toe. There's still some really big holes there. A lot of companies talk to other companies. And even internally, I think that the collaboration is stronger. When I'm talking employee to employee, I have features and functionality that there isn't even a Google analog for in Teams, in Stream, in a lot of the tools that Microsoft has, especially in the front of you know, Power Automate and Power Apps. There's just not a tool anymore. Google had Google App Maker to go toe-to-toe with Power Apps. For those who don't know, Power Apps is Microsoft's replacement for Microsoft Access. Access is, of course, this low-code development environment for companies to build software. Power Apps works on a phone, works on a tablet, works on the web, lets you build software quickly. Google had Google App Maker as part of the suite. They've sunset it, and they're
Well, it's still there. Yeah, it's being replaced by what they call a no-code developing platform.
Yeah, so it's coming, but
well, AppMaker's still there, but it's going to be replaced by AppSheet. But they also, again, this is for a small segment of users out there, right? How many people actually get into developing, app script? Well, Google has AppScript, they have BigQuery, they have all their GCP stuff. So I think the point is that if you look at what you could do on Microsoft, you could, most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, you can do the same thing on Google. It's just going to be a different way of doing it. Or you're going to have to use something that's not out of the box from GSuite, but that is part of the Google Cloud ecosystem. And that's something that Google's also, if you see what's happening there, they're navigating more towards this cohesive ecosystem. GSuite used to be completely separate from GCP, right? Those two worlds didn't exist. I don't know how it is at Microsoft, if the Azure team speaks to the 365 team at all, but in Google, those two teams used to be completely separate. Now they've combined forces, to be one cohesive Google Cloud unit because they understand the value of G Suite customers now having to use some of these Google Cloud tools like Cloud SQL, like App Engine, like AppScript, right? Like App Maker, AppSheet. So those two worlds are starting to combine now. They did exist, but they weren't part of the same family.
So as part of the $12 a month level in Microsoft land, Microsoft gives you 4 project management platforms, which you could argue is overkill. What does Google offer at that $12 level for project management?
So again, it depends what you would consider a project management tool. Right, with the $12.
Allows you to keep track of multiple projects, tasks, shows reports as who's got the ball, and who's doing what, where, and why. And so to put it another way, a Google Sheet doesn't count.
Well, so Google Sheet could be a starting point, right? And then, like I said, you can add all these workflow automations on top of the sheet. You can create, you can create your own project management solution. AppMaker was filling that void for a while for a lot of companies, right? We're moving everybody who built something like that on AppMaker over to Google App Engine to hold that until AppSheet comes out. So it's customized, right? You can custom build it. Out of the box, there's no project management.
A spreadsheet could be the answer to anything, but it's also nothing because a spreadsheet, there is no project management tool, you're right, built into that $200 a month level. When you say statements like there's an analog in Microsoft world, every company has some sort of task or projects to manage. Google has no answer for that. Microsoft gives you 4 at that same level. That's just one of many examples I can give where no, they don't have a solution for everything that a business needs. On top of this $12 a month, now I've also got to buy Asana or Rike or something else to do that. And I can do that in Microsoft land too, but to me it's not apples to apples because there's all these other tools that Microsoft gives you at that same price level that I don't believe that there's an analog for in the G Suite. And these are not niche things. I mean, companies do project management.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Why is that not a built-in feature of the platform? Same with Power Automate. That's included, and it's Microsoft's competitor to Zapier. For those who don't know, it allows you to put buttons in any of the Office 365 products to hear things happen and react and respond. So I've got clients that use Power Automate whenever they get an invoice sent to accounts payable at acme.com, and there's a file attachment. I can use Power Automate with no coding, no scripting to drag and drop my way to building a tool to take that PDF attachment, glean the details out, and put it in their accounting system. right? I can use it to build a workflow where when a document is tagged as ready for review, somebody gets a notification, approves that document, and moves it on. A lot of the customers with Ian Computers and beyond that we work with are taking advantage of these tools to streamline how they operate. We're talking to a client right now that whenever they get within 5 miles of a customer's location, Power Automate automatically sends that customer a text message. Steve is 5 minutes away, you know, and that's not software development. And there's no, you know, app script, Google's latest offering, they call it a low code environment. It's exclusively writing code.
No, yeah, you definitely have to know some code to be efficient in it.
You know, they don't have an answer for a tool to automate.
I'm gonna jump in. We got about 13 minutes to go.
Oh yeah, time has flown.
Time flies when we're having fun. Dustin, I made you the presenter if you wanted to show some of these things, but I wanted to really talk with Joey while you kind of queue up some of the things you might want to show, Dustin.
Sure.
You know, Joey, we work with a lot of different companies. I can't think of one, I would say, sales organization that we work with that working at Microsoft right now. If they're a car dealership, if they're predominantly sales, they're all using GSuite.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, like you say, the people are coming in off the street, they're already familiar with the platform. And then I guess the reverse is true. I can't think of one accounting or an accounting firm that's using GSuite. I can't think of one. You know, and I'm sure there's ones out there, but you know, just you know, I think some industries seem to really gravitate. So I guess in the client success stories, you know, do you see some industries that you know you're really hitting home runs, and then some where it's kind of toe to toe in a more even mix, or you know, talk a little bit more about some of those success stories.
Yeah, I mean, the industry play, it used to be more prominent in terms of, you know, you could look at an industry and say, okay, that's a good fit for G Suite, and you know, this industry is a good fit for Microsoft. The line has kind of blurred recently, and it's become more of a, you know, what's right for our business, irrelevant of the industry. Now, to your point with accounting and finance teams, the biggest, not the biggest, but one of the biggest barriers to entry with a company that's looking at G Suite is, how big is their finance team, and how many years have they had that Excel worksheet, right? How many macros do they have? How many pivot tables do they have? Because that's not going to, you know, we tell companies, don't move that to Google. It's not worth your time and effort. You've been working on this document or this worksheet for 20 years. Like, you can't expect it to just seamlessly convert. So, you know, those type of companies, Google has really stepped up big time with healthcare companies. A lot of it because of the security, a lot of it because of just the, you know, the intuitiveness and the demographic of the users coming into the workforce. They also, you know, once they agreed to sign the BAA back in 2012, I think it was, you know, because a lot of healthcare companies just weren't even considering Google back then. And we all know healthcare is traditionally a technology laggard, right? They're one of the industries that don't really move the needle too much in technology. But the last couple of years, you know, forces have shifted their way of thinking into understanding now the value of technology. And again, going back to the statement I said, where vertical doesn't really matter as much anymore, you know, companies who have 20 servers in their office, companies who have a bunch of you know, servers that are coming end of life, you know, these are type of companies that are looking at moving everything to the cloud. And when you think about moving to the cloud and you're thinking about moving your email and files to the cloud, there really are two choices, right? 365 or G Suite. There's a couple of outliers, you know, the other hosted exchanges and stuff like that, but predominantly it's 365 versus G Suite. So these companies are now looking at both, right? And having a checklist to say, okay, what's best not only for the business, but you know, the decision makers, what's going to make my life easier? What's going to allow me to focus more of my time on doing tasks that I can help drive value to the organization versus just maintaining and patch fixing and overseeing these servers. So it's shifted the way that IT decisions are being made. It's also shifting the way that IT workers are working on a day-to-day basis. So the vertical play doesn't really exist too much anymore in my world. Government, obviously it has a stronghold with Microsoft. EDU, Google's really penetrating that market. But when you look at the business landscape, right, retail, manufacturing, healthcare, financial services, we have customers across all verticals. And it comes down, it's coming more down to the business itself than the vertical.
I see. That's good. Go ahead. So, Dustin, we've got 8 minutes left. What would you want to show us in, some comparison?
I'm looking beyond spreadsheets and email at some of the other things that we get out of the box that I don't necessarily believe that there's a analog for. We talked about project management, but this Power Automate tool, I'm in SharePoint, no, I'm not. Sorry. I'm in this SharePoint site here, and I put a button on the screen using Power Automate, which is right here, one of the other products in the suite. And I said, I want to request HR approval before I do something with this document. And then I, as an end user, can build steps for that item in SharePoint. Go get it. Get all my information. And then I want you to make an approval step. First person to respond, no, everybody has to approve. Now I'll make it first. And as I click into these fields, all the fields above about me, all the fields that we know about this document are here for me to drag and drop in. And then I do another level of approval and say, take this document and convert it to a PDF and then throw it over here and then send everybody this email that it's done. There are hundreds and hundreds of pre-built connectors, most of which aren't even for Microsoft products, that I can use to build connections between applications, to do things behind the scenes, to make things easier. And this is a standard component of Office 365, including, by the way, the GSuite to a certain extent, Google Calendar, Drive, Sheets, Tasks. I can connect to these things and work with them using this platform that's included at that $12 a month level. Teams, similarly, when we talk about collaboration, I'm in a phony baloney team, but in my company, this is the only piece of software we use. We're using a lot more software than this, but all my files about a client are here, and it's backed by SharePoint. And the metadata features that I have are here. You can get metadata in Google Drive. You have to go up to the $25 per month level. It's not included in the $12 a month level. I can work with my content directly within Teams. If I've got a project plan, right? Same company, same channel. I'm working in here. There's 12 people looking at my feed. That's why it's slow, I swear. But I've got my project plan and my Kanban board, and I'm working directly in here, and I'm working with file attachments that are also part of this team without having to leave this interface. And then after I've worked on the project plan for this company, if I wanted to see my notes, they're here. Excel files that I want to bubble up to the top level, other applications that I'd want to bring in. I can do everything that I need to do in one spot, and everybody else can be working with these things at the same time. And that to me is the next level of collaboration that Slack and Teams provide, in addition to video chat and things like that. You can make your own tabs in this and do lots of really neat things. These are the sorts of catch-up items that I'm talking about. These are the sorts of things that businesses expect today beyond the basics that that Microsoft is providing, that Slack is providing, that Google's still figuring out their footing on, in my opinion. Just the basics of having a place to talk about a project and referencing files and referencing employees. If I had to do this in Google land, correct me if I'm wrong, Joey, I'd be doing this over email. And then if a new team member comes on board, I've got to forward that thread of emails to them. With this, I can relate documents and people and see it all in one place. That, you know, a lot of people believe is the future of collaboration. And that's what I hope that they get Currents to. Right now, it's a fancy chat. You know?
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't use email, you'd use, you know, chat, and also team drives, which, you know, allows you to securely share documents with OUs or groups of people. So, you know, again,
Oh, we lost.
I lost him. Oh no! Come back, Joey. Too many hops to the West Coast.
Fiber cut. Okay, we're down to the last 3 minutes here. So we will give Joey an extended chance to answer some of the questions brought up. We're going to have another webinar with Joey here on Tuesday, July 14th at noon. And he's going to share with us how to maximize the power of GSuite. I think, you know, this is one of those cases where, you know, GSuite was the early leader in this space, and now they have some catching up to do. But there's certainly a lot that you can do with GSuite. So we're gonna reconnect with Joey coming up on Tuesday, July 14th at noon, and see all that we can do to squeeze GSuite to its maximum potential. So thank you all for joining. Are there any questions here in the last 2 minutes? We've had a lot of different topics brought up today. Any questions out there from the floor? Other than what happened to poor Joey.
Yeah, as I was about to say. I just hope he's okay. Well, thank you, Ian, so much for having me. That was a blast. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you for joining.
Yeah. He's connecting.
Okay, here's Joey.
You're back.
We were worried that there was a earthquake on the West Coast.
I don't know what that was. That was power went out for like a second and then bam. Okay.
No.
Well, thank goodness for technology. I can get back on quickly.
We were highlighting that since we are having to wrap up now, that we are going to have a follow-on on July 14th, where you're going to be able to go in detail, Joey, into how to get most power out of GSuite.
Sure.
So you know, that will be the ultimate definitive on you know, how all of these things work best in GSuite.
Great. Looking forward to that, because there, you know, I think to both platforms, there's a lot of you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
Like the Power, you know, the Power BI that you were showing me, right? I didn't know that existed, right? But also, I know that most companies are only using 30 to 40% of what these platforms come with, right? I would bet any amount of money that a majority of the companies that you deal with are, you know, barely using some of those Power components, not because they're not needed. It's just because they don't know how to use it or what it's going to be used for, or how to use it, unless you have, you know, someone like us or a company like you guys walking them through it and showing them. So, you know, a lot to be said there.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a great point to end on. And thank you guys for joining today. And Joey, I look forward to being back with you.
Yeah, thanks guys. I appreciate it, Ian. Thank you for having me. Dustin, good job.
Thank you, Joe. It was wonderful.
All right.
Talk to you a little later. Goodbye.
Bye.